Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with the Tim May Show. Yeah, you recognize him over there in the co-pilot seat. Really needs no introduction, but I'll introduce him anyway. Bill Bender of the Sporting News. Welcome once again to the Tim May Show. You know, you're accruing a lot of hours, a lot of flight hours in that co-pilot seat, man. One of these days, I might just let you land the plane. What do you think?
No, it's always good to be. Hey, we haven't talked in a while, Tim. I think it's been a couple weeks, but
Yeah.
saw you a couple weeks ago at Ohio State Media Availability. Spring practice is coming. As you know, this time of year for me, it's a little bit of March Madness, a little bit of college football, a little bit of NFL Combine. It's actually my favorite time of year at work because I get to do a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really funny because I've got you on and we got a little bit of everything in this show because I want to touch on several subjects with you because I consider you an expert. I don't know if that's in quotes or not. Do you prefer it to be in quotes, expert?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
Expert with quotes, but I'll take it. You know, I love talking anything around this area, as you know,
Yeah.
ingrained in Central Ohio. So wherever you want to go.
Yeah, we're even going to touch on your connection with the Deeblers to a certain extent, but I'll get to that in a second. I've also got, ladies and gentlemen, an interview with Ryan Patton, and you're going, "Who's Ryan Patton?" Well, Ryan Patton was an intern and basically wanted to get into the strength and conditioning business way back when he was at Ohio State, originally from Delphos St. John's High School, and lo and behold, when the upheaval came in 2011 with the coaching staff at Ohio State in football, he went down south and said, on almost a whim, and tried out for being a member of the pit crew at Hendrick Motorsports. Next thing you know, he gets picked. Next thing you know, he wins a Daytona 500 with Jimmy Johnson. He's on that pit crew. And lo and behold, after a long drought, he was on the pit crew for William Byron, who won the Daytona 500 here 2 weeks ago. So he's back in the winner's circle. Ryan Patton, one of the great guys I've ever met. I've done stuff with him before, but it's a pretty interesting interview about teamwork, et cetera, and having dreams. And Ryan Patton's one of the coolest guys I've met. So that's coming up after my conversation here with Bill Bender, my co-pilot. And remember, Bill, all of our conversation once we take off is on the voice recorder, the official voice recorder in the cockpit. You understand that, right?
I got you, no
It can
problem.
it can be played and replayed. But I digress, of course. Bill, I want to get your take. Number one, you were at that press conference a couple of weeks ago with Ryan Day, and here's Ohio State sitting here, considered one of the top two teams in the country already, and we're not even quite into March yet. Think that's legit, though, right? Based on what's gone on for Ohio State through the month of January and early February.
Well, you saw myself and some others, national media. We did our way too early top 25s
Yeah.
on January, right before Michigan played Washington. And, you know, Ohio State was probably around 5 or 6 in most of those. And then with all of the offseason ongoings, from the additions in the portal to adding Chip Kelly to promoting James Laurinaitis, I mean, you got to put him at number one or number two. I
And
think
players
Georgia
coming back. And also players coming back. You know, people shouldn't shortchange that, right? Yeah.
from a defense that averaged, you know, allowed like 12 points per game. And yeah, it's impossible not to say Georgia, Ohio State, 1 and 2, either order. You want to go Georgia 1, that's fine. You want to go Ohio State 1, that's fine. I think Texas will be 3, but there's no question. And in terms of a team that quotes won the offseason right now, you would have to think it's Ohio State.
Yeah. Of course, the big next major step in the offseason is to win spring football and then see how the dominoes fall after spring football, especially in a quarterback room that's got 5 talented guys in it, but, you know, only one guy can play. And number two, all of these guys, the only guy who's played a lot is Will Howard, the transfer from Kansas State. So you got to figure he's at least, if he's not 1, he's 1A, right? With Devin Brown, maybe 1B or 2. But just real quick, it is interesting from year to year how rosters change in college football anymore, right? But here you're looking at an Ohio State quarterback room that's got 5 guys, 2 of them freshmen. One of them is going to be a sophomore who played the last 3 quarters of the Cotton Bowl when Devin Brown went down with the injury, and one guy who's won a Big 12 championship in Will Howard. Just give me a nutshell assessment of what you think of that room right now.
Well, Will Howard came there to have a chance to start. Obviously, he was made available a couple weeks ago, answered questions, came across real impressed
Yeah.
because,
Hey, he came across like a grown man, didn't he? Isn't it pretty funny, right?
well, mature. And here's the thing with Ohio State's quarterback position that I always talk about is, yes, they've had a lot of first round picks at the position in recent years with Dwayne and Justin and CJ. CJ, obviously, just fantastic in the NFL. But Ohio State's last three national championship quarterbacks are in reverse order, right? You would go JT and Cardale. You gotta count both that
Oh
year.
yeah, absolutely.
Craig Krenzel and Lancaster's own Rex Kern.
Yeah,
These aren't guys that went on to like 20-year NFL careers, but they're also guys that everybody in Columbus knows forever. Craig's obviously still active. Cardell's still in the area. Rex is a legend in my hometown. So Will Howard has a chance to be that guy. Go in 1 year, win a national championship. What I'm interested in as far as spring ball goes, Tim, and I'm sure you are too, is okay, 5 guys means there's probably going to be 4 or 3 after the spring because 1 or 2 of those guys may decide to move on. I don't think it'll be Julian Sayin. So it's those other 3 where I think the interest to me is
yeah,
because of the way quarterbacks come and go.
yeah. That's the curiosity factor, number one. Number two, it's funny that you just named those 3 quarterbacks who won the last 3 national championships for Ohio State, and what all 4 of them had in common, including Cardale, was the ability and the willingness to run the football. And Craig Krenzel, man, he made some huge runs in that run to the national championship. Rex Kern, man, he was a dazzler with the football. And of course, JT Barrett, he ran. You basically saw the Urban Meyer offense with JT Barrett at the helm, the way he would run that zone read option. Was also a quite proficient passer. And then Cardale Jones, once he got rumbling, man, he was hard to bring down. He was like a power back running the ball, especially against Alabama when they needed those big plays. That's what Will Howard and Devin Brown bring to the fore. Aaron Nolan is a little bit like that, the freshman. Julian Sayin would rather stand there and throw the ball, but he can also run it. And of course, Lincoln Keno's can. So with Chip Kelly coming in, who's made a lot of his living on having an offense that spreads the field, but also incorporates a running quarterback. Not you run him every play, but you got to run him some in the modern game, right? I think you agree. If you look around the country, the way things are being done, I think Ohio State's in pretty good stead in that regard because CJ, bless his heart, until the last game of his college career, didn't really show off his wheels, except maybe his first time he played against Michigan State, that one long run. And so I think you got to have that run threat, a legitimate run threat from that quarterback. And it looks like Ohio State's going to have that this year. Do you agree?
Their offense is going to look different. And you just hit on it with Chip Kelly. There's a lot of preconceived notions about his offense because they spread the field and because it was wide open, and people will go all the way back to Oregon. But you just said it. I think Ohio State's going to go to a more, I keep using the term 60-40 offense. I think they're going to run the ball 60% of the time. I do. I think with Will Howard and having that option, the 2 running backs, not just Travion, Quinshaw Judkins is a stud, absolute stud at Ole Miss. And I think it changes the dynamic of what they're going to do. And if you look at their offense before the last 2 years, they were a 60-40 offense, even with Justin Fields. So, and I think that's synonymous with winning in the Big Ten and then going on to the playoff, and you change it up a little bit then. But I definitely think Chip Kelly, you look at UCLA last year, 2 running backs averaged 5 yards per carry.
Yeah.
He wants to run the football and spread the field, and I think that marriage will work out.
Yeah. Interesting you said playoffs. You used that word playoffs in your last couple of sentences there. The 5 and 7 has been adopted. It's almost like the Declaration of Independence came, flowing out of the meeting of the college football playoff group. And we all know there was an audacious power play, or at least hinted at an audacious power play by what the Big Ten and the SEC to possibly get 4 teams committed to 4 teams, at least from their leagues, each of their leagues being invited. That was quashed. But it was interesting. You never know what somebody's going to give you unless you ask, right? But what's your take on the 5-7 setup? Is with the Power Five obviously dwindling now, diminishing to the Power Four, 5, 5, 7 means at least guaranteed one of those other conferences is going to get a guaranteed spot in the playoff. I'm talking about I don't know what you call them now, the lesser seven, whatever you call them.
Right.
But then the seven after that, the seven highest ranked teams, the five highest ranked conference champions in the final college football playoff rankings, and then the seven other teams are going to be wild cards, so to speak. Do you like that setup?
I guess.
Did you get lost when I was describing that just then?
No, I was thinking about how I want to best answer this question because I would say I guess I do. I think we're skipping a step, Tim. I think
Yeah.
8 was the right number to me. Eight made sense because on any given year, I don't think there's more than 5 or 6 teams that can win it all anyway. Or,
Yeah.
you want to preserve some of the regular season. You mentioned the power play with the SEC and the Big Ten. You look at if we were doing a 12-team model the last 10 years in the 4-team era, about 54% of the at-large bids would have gone to the SEC or the Big Ten. But you know what they want? They want more. That's why we're talking about a 14. Why they want a 14-teamer is they want the SEC champion and the Big Ten champion to be basically guaranteed that bye. And then the other 12 teams play. And they want 70% of those at-large bids, not 50%. They want 70% with these large conferences. I think we're all going to have to adjust how we watch football. One of the things my colleague Mike DeCourcy brought up, Tim, is take Ohio State, for example. They're a great example. They don't want to go 9-3. They don't want to go 9-3 and get in. They want to go 11-1, dominate the regular season, and take 1 or 2 swings in the playoff. Now, I look at Ohio State as I would look at Kansas in the basketball tournament. They're going to be in every year.
Yeah.
It's just going to be an adjustment of if people think we're going to watch the regular season like we used to, there I think we got another thing coming there.
Yeah. I think they're really messing around with you can only mess around with tradition for so long until it totally goes away. And I agree 100% of what you just said. But then when you look at the Big Ten with 18 teams in it now, coming up with Washington, Oregon, USC, and UCLA coming on board, but especially Oregon. I mean, you could make a case for Oregon and Ohio State being in the top 4, top 3. I'm talking about preseason going into the season, and then how's it going to play out? But then you throw in the specter of the Big Ten championship game, where you could beat a team in the regular season and then get beat by that team in the Big Ten championship game, and neither one of y'all make the top 4. And the point is, you want to make the top 4, and that's what's going to be interesting is how that's going to play out, and whether or not whether I really think we're going to see the end of the conference championship game eventually, as soon as the contract runs out with Fox. That could be interesting, but I really think we're going to see the end of that because, man, we're talking right now that if you don't make the top 4 in the seedings in the college football playoff, you're going to have to play, in essence, a play-in game into the quarterfinals. 5 is going to play 12, 6 is going to play 11, et cetera, et cetera. Then they're going to move into the quarterfinals. The top 4 teams will get byes. That's not fair in college football. That's almost fair in college basketball, but in college football, with roster limits, et cetera, teams are going to just get beat up, man. By the time you get to the championship game, it's going to be interesting to see what rosters look like. And I don't know if you agree or not, but I think that's going to be one of the first things when they look back on this first year of a 12-team playoff that they're going to be scratching their heads about.
Well, so let's talk about the Big Ten championship game first in the playoff era. 10 years of it, I think 2 of the 10 years, there was a situation where both teams could actually get in the playoff. It was winner gets in for both teams.
Yeah.
We've watched Michigan hammer 3 straight teams. We watched Ohio State. I mean, I went to one of the Northwestern games, and there was no part of me that thought, hey, well, the Wildcats are going to win this game. I was at Michigan State, Iowa was the last one where it was truly, okay, the winner's in. Iowa was undefeated. Michigan State had one loss. The winners
Yeah.
going to the Cotton Bowl and play. And we would make the argument that year Ohio State might have been better than both of those teams.
Yeah.
So I think those are highly devalued, and the one snag will be the SEC because they're the one conference where that is so part of their identity. I think they're going to cling on to that longer than we think. And then what was the second part I got? I was the one that went on there for that.
Well, I was just talking about how, but after that, you face this gauntlet of possibly 4 games. I mean, literally, the Big Ten could play for a championship, and both teams end up in that 5 to 12 realm instead of the top 4. You understand what I'm saying? Meaning, because one would have beaten one, and then then the other beats that team in the Big Ten championship game. And so, what have you gained? It's like you're almost really, if you're gonna be in those first 4 games of the college football playoff, you're almost better off not making the Big Ten championship game, if you follow me.
Well, no, yeah, and you said it, Tim. How do we incentivize the players now?
I don't know.
I think I keep pointing to Malik Murphy last year, the Texas backup quarterback. He started in 2 games during the season that they needed them to win, and he transferred to Duke before the playoff.
Yeah.
You're going to I had this debate with my editor last week. I said, you understand that players are probably going to opt out of these playoff games.
Yeah, they are.
There's going to be, what if you're the first round receiver and your team's an 11 seed and you're a 20-point underdog? People say, well, we want them to compete.
Yeah.
That's where the revenue sharing conversation is going to come into play. Absolutely. And there's one other thing that's just stuck with me, and you were standing right across from me when we were at Indianapolis last summer, and the way that Ryan Day seamlessly just went right in where, like, yeah, Michigan Ohio State game could get moved. It could.
Sure.
It's not out of the realm of possibility, because imagine if you're Ohio State at the end of the year, you're playing Michigan, all the emotions that go to that. Then you're playing a Big Ten championship game. And then let's say you've got a 5 seed game. I mean, that's a lot. And then 3 more games after that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 6 games, Tim, and these are college kids. I mean, they're going to have to incentivize them playing that. And I think Ryan Day is further ahead on that conversation than we might think, than we might want to believe.
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, I'm going to blow your mind, though. I've used this on my podcast many times, or excuse me, my show many times. Ohio State and Michigan could be the top 2 teams in the Big Ten at the end of the year next year. This is a hypothetical, because I don't really see that playing out that way. But hypothetically, they could be the top 2 teams at the end of the season, ranked 1 and 3 or 1 and 2. Then they would play in the Big Ten championship game, because the Big Ten championship game is going to feature the top 2 teams in the Big Ten. I think is based on the college football playoff rankings. So they could play in that game. So point is, they could play at the end of the year in the game, and number 1 could beat number 2. And so then 2 moves to like number 1 in the country. 1 moves to like number 6. And then they could play the next week, and the number 6 plays number 1, and that number 6 could beat number 1. And now they move. All of a sudden, neither one of them is in the top 4. That'd be hard to believe, but neither one of them is in the top 4, right? They could play the next week. They could literally, hypothetically, be number 5 versus number 12. So they could play 3 games in a row.
And some people might, some people
think that's not going to happen is crazy, but go ahead.
Yeah, and then you just said it earlier about the tradition. You say the Ohio State-Michigan regular season game is the crown jewel of the college football regular season. That's been proven the last couple years.
Yes.
And at that point, there's not really repercussions for that game other than jersey color.
Yeah.
Because if you play again, let's play out your scenario. Ohio State beats Michigan in Columbus. They play the following week, Michigan wins. They play the next week, Ohio State wins. So Ohio State wins 2 of 3 and wins the argument that year. But that's not how we've seen this rivalry. Look at the repercussions from this year's game. Michigan's entire program has changed with Jim Harbaugh leaving, and Ohio State responded. I keep using the Empire Strikes Back narrative with this. It's, I guess, like in this scenario, you got to consider Ohio State, Darth Vader, and the Stormtroopers, but they have struck back and then some.
Yeah,
Which is why,
The
yeah.
Confederation has come together. Go ahead.
So yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. And the other question, I'll ask you this one. Next year we go do all these games, these quarterfinals, whatever you want to call them. What if the games are terrible? What if
Yeah.
they're all blowouts?
Yeah,
I
what if
mean,
they are?
then it's different than the NCAA March Madness first round where Duke blows out somebody in the first round. I can click over to True TV, the other 8-9 game. You're stuck with that game for 4 hours.
Yeah.
And it's risky. I think we're taking a risk by going to 12 teams. I still would have gone to 8.
I agree 100%. Number one. Number two, I think a lot of this, and don't get mad at me, Bill, but a lot of this was, I think this furor was almost made up that there had to be a 12-team playoff or a 16-team playoff or even an 8-team playoff by media, by a lot of national media guys and stuff for whatever reason. Because I don't know why they want college football to look like the NFL. The NFL is already there. But take this into consideration too about the Ohio State Michigan game. Which game would be more important to you at the end of the year? The game or playing the next week for the Big Ten championship? Which game would you most want to maybe rest some guys to get ready for the next game? Do you follow my drift? That's where this could be mind blowing. Now, I really truly believe Michigan is in a this is no bulletin. Michigan is in a rebuild mode. I had to talk about that a lot with Angelique Shingelis and John Arbesnik, a former Michigan player from way back in the 70s, last week on my show. But so it could be a while before we talk about Michigan in that realm. But it's just messing with stuff, that you don't necessarily need to mess with, because college football was in a pretty good place already. I want to ask you this though. Do you see this sooner rather than later moving to a 16-team playoff? What is your just from what you've picked up on, what you've reported, what you've learned about the desire for it to be even larger?
I think they'll go to 14 at some point because
14?
of I think that'll be the number because they'll try to emulate the NFL, which does 14, and they'll give the carrot of it will be you get a bye. The two champions will get a bye. The other just flaw in this Death Star, while I'm just throwing out Star Wars analogies,
Yeah, you are.
If you are a Ohio State season ticket holder and they get a 1-4 seed this year, they don't get a home game. And I think that's absurd because Ohio State has one of the most distinctive home field advantages. I think you could say that for Penn State and Georgia. If you're a top 4 seed, you don't get a home game. 5 through 8 gets a home game, 1-4 doesn't. I think it's absurd. I understand the Bulls rule in all this. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I mean, what better way to sell a season ticket package than say, all right, we're going to throw that home game on there too. Yeah. And it would be, I mean, I think that's one of the appeal of this expanded playoff is the on-campus games because, I think you may have covered this game. Ohio State LSU in the shoe for a playoff game. Amazing thinking about it. But they don't, instead, it'll be Ohio State versus LSU at the Lucas Oil Stadium or something, you know what I mean? Or at the Rose or at the one of the New Year's Day Six Bowls. And that's weird. That's one advantage the NFL has is those conference championship games are on campus, as in Kansas City and Green Bay and Cincinnati, places like that.
Yeah. Well, I think Ohio State would prefer not to be in that first round, to be honest with you. I think Ohio State would prefer, I know Ryan, they talked about it. It's going to be big to try to be in the top 4. It's going to be huge. The round of, if they went to 14, then only two of those teams, like you said, would get a bye. So it's almost confusing a little bit to talk about. It'll probably be very interesting to watch. And it'll probably be very interesting to cover. But it's going to be a grind on college football teams, the ones that make the playoffs, and of course the ones that advance like no time ever. And I think that's what they're losing sight of. And heck, if you had a first 5 through 12 game, and if you're Ohio State and you're playing, Podunk U from the the Podunk Conference, don't you rest some of your big time guys in that game? See if you can get by. You know what I mean? Who knows? What's Ohio State going to do with this basketball situation, do you think? Because suddenly Jake Diebler's got this group of guys believing, They've won 2 games in the way that Chris Holtman's teams had trouble doing, which is at the end of games, instead of folding, they've stepped up. At Michigan State this past week, the week before that against Purdue, yeah, they got beat at Minnesota, but at least at Michigan State, they cracked that, stopped that big long-time losing streak of true road games. Does Jake Diebler have a shot? And number 2, you have a little bit of a I don't know, some spice in this stew, because your first big time job was at Upper Sandusky right after the Diebler brothers left, right?
Right before they came, actually.
Oh, right before they came.
I
got
so
you.
I missed them by a year. My first job, I covered local sports in Upper Sandusky, Ohio, up there in Wyandotte County. One of the best years of reporting. Aaron Cordy was my editor. He's still around in Upper, and what a fun way to learn the business, because you had to work your butt off. You were covering local high schools. So I leave to go to a job in Newark, Ohio, and in comes Jake and Keith Diebler, their dad, and Jake and John came in. I will say this: I went up and watched some of their games that year. They won the state championship, and they played the most fun style of basketball you could possibly play. Jake was the point guard, all-time, I think he leads all-time Ohio assists and steals. And then John, who we remember from his Buckeye days, was just one of the best shooters and most prolific scorers I've ever seen at the high school level. So it's my way of telling you what's going on right now doesn't surprise me. When you come from a coaching family like that, when you know what it means to be a Buckeye. I know Jake played at Valpo. He just got a way about him that they follow. And I mean, I know how many more wins would it take for him to get considered? I think he should be considered. Now, the other part of this, yes, they're going to expand the search. Yes, they're going to look at guys like Lamont Paris, who checks a lot of boxes.
Yeah.
And Chris Gent, obviously, I'm old enough to remember Chris Gent playing. And when I was a 6th grade boy at St. Mary's playing basketball, a lot of my buddies idolized Chris Gent because the way he played basketball, how we were taught to play basketball. And I think those are the type of guys that are going to deserve to be considered candidates. They got to knock it out of the park here, because what happened, and I think my general opinion of Ohio State basketball, Thad Matta had it mastered, right? 20-plus wins every year, made a couple national title type runs. They got in the title game. They got in the Final Four. They recruited well. Ohio State should be a 20-plus. It doesn't have to be like a football team, but it should be a 20-plus win program. And I think what Jake has brought has that little bit of pride factor. Being an Ohio guy, knows what it means. Couldn't be happier, whether he gets the job or not. And just from that 1 year in Upper Sandusky, it's really cool to see what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, let me ask you this, because, you coach your kids' teams. Y'all just had a state tournament or just finished up your big time state stuff this week. I mean, I'm talking about, you coach all kinds of sports, but what is it that if you could put your finger on it, what have you seen from Ohio State against Purdue and at Michigan State that you could put your finger on that Jake Diebler has made an obvious, fast difference in this? What would you put your finger on there?
Just that so when you coach, and I coach, obviously this is not Division I.
No, but you still coach.
You
understand what I'm saying.
Basketball, there are games when you get out there and between 4th grade girls or 7th grade boys or high school boys, whatever it is, you kind of know, man, we don't have it today right now.
Yeah.
And then you got to take a timeout and just, hey, this isn't good enough. I think it's just the passion and the fire. They brought some fire to the team. And, the late game stuff, I think coaching a basketball game, again, any level, most of the time it comes down to that final 5 to 10 minutes. And they've been on point in late in games. I mean, going to Michigan State and winning is not easy, no matter what Michigan State's record is. Yeah. And to go out and have that kind of closer gene about them. And I think Jake sees the game. When I coach, I am hardest on point guards. Jake was a point guard. Jake sees the game like a point guard, I'm sure. And those are the guys that I think, when they coach, you're like, yeah, he'd probably be frustrating at times because he can see everything. And sometimes when you can see everything and it's not working out, you can react wrong. But Man, I can't be more impressed, like I said, and I think that's the
Yeah.
thing, a little bit more fire in them. They could win a couple more games. They could get to the NIT, and at that point, he might be considered a serious candidate. Now, you is that an emotional hire at that point? I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, because you really got to take a look at what's out there. Like I know there was Sean Miller and Mick Cronin talk. Mick's not coming here, not to Columbus, and I don't. Sean Miller, I doubt it. I
Yeah.
just that's just
The
my gut
baggage
feel on
there,
this.
the baggage
Right.
there is obvious. You gotta really explain that one. But I think most people want to win, right? I mean, when you come right down to it, most of the fans, most of the people who've been criticizing, they want they want to see the team win a lot. You know what I
Well,
mean? So
well, yeah. And Jay Billis said he struck me last week because I've been asked. He said that Ohio State's the best job in the Big Ten from a resource standpoint. Yes,
oh yeah, it is.
from a recruiting standpoint and where you're in a backyard. I can also tell you this from coaching junior high-ish basketball now. There are a bunch of very good basketball players coming up in Central Ohio. You've got to be able to recruit this area, and I think it's going to be awesome to see the next guy do that in a couple years.
Yeah.
And my kids foul those very awesome kids a lot. No, they play hard, but they have fun. No, I think you need that. So it is a top job. I was thinking about that critically, and I'm like, Indiana should be. Purdue kind of is. Michigan State is going to be a top Big Ten job even when Tom leaves because he's made that a top program. But
Yeah.
I think Ohio State is the thing with the Big Ten, it's there. Like Wisconsin, the Big Ten's not great this year. Other than Purdue, I just don't see any team that's like, yeah, they're going to be in the Final Four.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. By the way, before we move on, what do USC, UCLA? That's kind of a obvious thing there, but Oregon and Washington bring to the Big Ten basketball wise? Does it upgrade as a group? Do they upgrade the group? It looks like with UCLA, obviously, with all the banners, obviously, they bring that reputation. The other three have sort of like off and on been pretty good and stuff. What do you think? What do you think about those four?
Well, I don't know if you have. I've had a chance to go in Poly Pavilion. It's
I mean,
amazing.
I have, yeah.
Like you walk in and you're like,
Wait a minute. The first time I was in Poly Pavilion was covering the Olympics in 1984, covering the gymnastic stuff that happened in Poly Pavilion. Go ahead now.
Mary Lou Retton, were you there
Yeah.
for that? Look
Oh
at
yeah.
you.
Yeah.
That's amazing. No, you took the history in pretty quick. John Wooden statues out there, and you're like, and you walk around that campus, and I just kept saying, why? By the way, that was when Chip Kelly, it was his first spring game. I was there for that.
Oh,
And
really? Yeah.
I just kept saying to myself, why would anybody not go to school here?
Yeah.
I mean,
I
those
love it. I mean,
Sunset-
the stairway up to nowhere, you know what I mean? And everything else, it's right on Sunset Boulevard. It's like right in Bel Air's right next door. Go ahead. Yeah.
But yeah, I think they'll be solid. They haven't won a national championship. The Pac-12 hasn't won a national championship since Arizona, and that was a long time ago.
Long.
98, I think.
Yeah.
So USC will be okay, but I mean, again, they're there for football. Washington, I don't know how much they add basketball wise. Oregon has had some good teams though,
Right.
and they've fallen off a little bit, but they put teams in the Sweet 16 and Final Four. I think what it adds is a lot of late tip-off times, and it'll be interesting to see how they balance that. I know last March I was at Columbus for the first round games. USC had a noon tip, and Andy Enfield at the time was kind of like, well, we haven't really thought about that. We're thinking about this game. Well, they're playing Michigan State at noon, and I'm like, this is going to be your life pretty soon when you're playing a Saturday game at the Breslin Center or at Minnesota. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that travel will be something to see how everybody negotiates that. I don't know. I mean, I would have to go look and see what, like, Ohio State's farthest trip now is what, Nebraska?
Yeah.
I think, and I don't think that affects them much, but the continued travel on 19 to 22-year-olds, yeah, that's something you got to monitor.
Yeah, as I like to say, once you fly over Lincoln from Columbus, you're almost halfway to UCLA. So travel is going to be interesting, and we all know that travel can be made out to be something that maybe, because I remember the Oregon football team coming in here in 2021 with Mario Cristobal and pulling basically pulling an upset in Ohio Stadium. Remember, C.J. Stroud was his second or third game as a starter, and so that game started at noon, 9 a.m. West Coast time. So it'll be interesting. Hey, tell you what, let me get to this interview I did with Ryan Patton, as I introduced earlier in the show, with Ryan Patton, who works for Hendrick Motorsports, is the tire carrier for the number 24 team, the William Byron car that won the Daytona 500 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago. Let's get the pretty interesting interview in terms of where Ryan Patton went from the Ohio State strength and conditioning program, interning and kind of being on that path to now being a long timer with Hendrick Motorsports, one of the great teams in motor racing worldwide. Let's get to my conversation with Ryan Patton. Man, as promised, boy, straight from pit lane right to the Tim May show. Ryan Patton. Well, you and I talked once before a long time ago, but I've never had you. I don't think you on the Tim May show. Welcome to the Tim May show. And by the way, what were you doing on pit lane last Sunday in Daytona? What was going on there, man?
Well, thanks for having me, man. I know we've talked before, and it's always good to see you. It's an honor to be on your show, man. But yeah, Monday, I was on the pit crew for William Byron.
Monday, yeah. Excuse me, rain was still in my ears, man. Go ahead. Now.
Yeah. Ours too, man. It was a wet weekend for sure. But 2024 Daytona 500 champion. I'm the tire carrier on the pit crew, man. So it's been it was a heck of a weekend, and it's been a hectic, busy but fun week here in Charlotte.
Yeah, absolutely. But your crew turned right around, and that's why I direct messaged you. I wanted to get you on sooner rather than later. But y'all turned around and crewed who did y'all crew for Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s team, right? In the Xfinity race that followed. Is that what it's still called now, Xfinity?
Right. Yeah. So
yeah. Y'all turned around an hour later and you're still working. What's going on there? Go ahead.
Yeah. So there's obviously rain in the area all weekend in Daytona, unfortunately. So we were able to race the qualifying race on Thursday. Unfortunately, in that race, we had an opportunity to win it, but we got wrecked, and it actually totaled our race car, our primary car. So our road crew guys and mechanics, they worked their guts out late Thursday night, all day Friday to get that car on track for about 30 minutes of practice time Friday. And then Saturday was a complete washout. That was the day the Xfinity race was supposed to have run. We at Hendrick Motorsports, we supply the pit crews to Dale Jr.'s Xfinity team, which is Junior Motorsports, obviously. And Dale being a former Hendrick driver, it all goes hand in hand. But we crew the Sammy Smith 8 car in that series. And so that race got rained out on Saturday and was supposed to be pushed to Sunday. And then we show up to the racetrack Sunday, and it was pushed to Monday. Mother Nature was not cooperating well. We show up to the track at 8:45, I think it was Monday, ready to pit the Xfinity Series. We'd gone through our team meeting with the Junior Motorsports crew and kind of got the lay of the land. And then we got the call like, hey, that race is going to be run after the Daytona 500 with the green flag for that race starting about 9 p.m., the green flag for the Daytona 500 starting at 4 p.m. So it was a long day for sure for us on Monday. Crewing the Daytona 500 is the Super Bowl of our sport, and that race obviously carries a lot of weight. There's a lot of pageantry. There's a lot of celebration in winning that. And so Victory Lane, we got to enjoy it a little bit at the end of the day, but we knew we had to get to work and fulfill our responsibilities to Junior Motorsports. So thankfully, with a lot of help from some of our backup crews at Hendrick, they were able to kind of break down our 24 pit box after the race, after we'd been to Victory Lane, did the hat dance, took our pictures. And I was sprinting from the 24 hauler to the pit stall for the Xfinity race. I think it was about a half a mile, and I was just sprinting to try to get there. The cars were already on track. They were rolling around to get ready to start the race. Fortunately, everybody at Junior Motorsports, they knew what was going on. They had set up that pit box and everything for us. We get there, we're still wearing our Team 24 fire suits, our Exalta fire suits, which is a different sponsor and even a different color than the fire suits that we wear for the Xfinity team. And so the first guy to see us there and to congratulate us was Dale Jr., which is a surreal moment. And he's like, what can we get to help you guys out? And so they had things set up. We plugged in our radios. We took off our radios for the Cup team and put those to the side. We put on our radios to the Junior Motorsports team. And by the time we got our air guns, hoses, regulators, jacks, tires, everything ready to go and ready to do a pit stop, I think we're about about 20 laps into the Xfinity race. So, but we had so much adrenaline, man, and so much excitement. We're just trying to get everything going. It hit me after the first pit stop in the Xfinity race when our driver came across the radio, Sammy Smith, and said, great stop, guys. It's good to see you made it. And we just kind of like laughed, but it was such a whirlwind from the time we took the checkered flag with William to the time we did that first pit stop with Sammy. It was just, man, it's hard to put into words the chaos, the excitement, and then trying to refocus yourself to do the job for that Xfinity race.
Yeah. You went from winning the Super Bowl, being part of the team that won the Super Bowl, to being part of the team that's in the USFL or something, right? I mean, you know what I mean? The development series.
Yeah, I would like to compare the Xfinity series to that of AAA baseball, right?
Yeah.
The Xfinity series typically runs on Saturday, the day before the Cup Series, and that series is filled with a bunch of drivers who are trying to work their way up to make it to the big leagues of the NASCAR Cup Series. And Sammy's a great kid. He's got a ton of talent, and they've got a really good team over there. Like our crew chief on that Sammy Smith car is Adam Wall. Adam's a former race engineer for Kyle Larson, and he's trying to find his way in the crew chiefing world. And so those two combined, we've got a great team there. I'm really looking forward to the Xfinity season because there's a lot of effort, a lot of excitement for that. And we got a hungry team over there. And then obviously Sunday, working at Hendrick Motorsports, the expectation, much like Ohio State football, is to win, and to dominate. And anything less than winning is, we got to go back. We got to go back to work and figure out why that happened. So, we didn't have much of a chance to enjoy it, but William is getting everybody on the team together tonight. So we're going to have a night out in Charlotte. We're going to start together as a team, have some dinner, maybe a few adult beverages, and then we'll see where the night takes us from there.
Gotcha. Hey, is William old enough to drink adult beverages yet? I'm just joking. I remember when I interviewed him, he came here to Columbus. He was driving the Xfinity series several years ago, and talked to him at basically Cap City Grill or whatever it's called. And I just remembered he was sitting there, and I think he was 18 or 19 then, but he looked like he was 14 or 15. I see now he's growing facial hair, right, to kind of look the part. But man, what a great young man, number one. Number two, talk about stepping into shoes, the number 24 car, right? And then number three, he's a hell of a driver. And if they could show, by the way, I like the way how all you Hendrick cars sandbagged all through Monday until it really mattered. And suddenly there's 7 Chevys in the top 10 there when the race came to the 4. Of course, y'all were helped by a couple of big ones, but yeah, William Byron. I mean, just tell us a little bit about him and what he's what makes him special, I guess.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, William is a Charlotte native, born and raised here, and his path to a racing career is unlike anybody else. William started on the computer on sim racing and doing that, and kind of was very successful in that. And that's kind of how got his parents on board of, hey, maybe let's try this out full time and getting you in a real race car. And so he got his start in a real car much later than, there's a lot of kids nowadays, they're starting their go-karting career or whatever at a very young age. I mean, yeah. Kyle Busch's son, Brexton, has been driving a car, I think, since he's been old enough to walk, and so, but William started on a computer, and, he had a lot of success, as you mentioned, coming up through the series, and whether it be Legends cars, which is, almost like a little Matchbox type car, so to speak, and then worked his way up into the truck series, into the Xfinity series, won championships, won a bunch of races. And then, like you mentioned, was given the keys to the 24 car, which is driven by the iconic Jeff Gordon for a number of years. And so Williams' path in the Cup Series, he was kind of behind a little bit. He didn't have that instant success that maybe a guy like Chase Elliott had. But man, I tell you what, he works just as hard, if not harder, than anybody in the garage. Since COVID, back if you remember the COVID year, there was no fans, there was no practice at these tracks. Drivers were showing up cold turkey and expected to go out and to race. And William spent a lot of time, and still does spend a lot of time, in the GM simulator, and whether it be there or at his home even. And they can do different things with setups, and he can get a lot of track time in on the sim. And so he works his guts out doing that, and he's very, very attentive to details. And so there's no stone left unturned. He watches a ton of film. you mentioned his beard and his scruff. He's got that going on, and that's, he's got a workout program that he's proud of now. So before the race, we were comparing workout notes and things of that nature. So he's really dialed in, which is awesome to see. I spent the first half of my career on Jimmy Johnson's 48 team, and I saw firsthand how hard Jimmy worked, every day, whether it was competing in triathlons or different types of events, just to stress the body, stress his mind. So that way, when he got inside the race car at the end of 500 miles, and other guys were tired and maybe falling out of the seat, so to speak, Jimmy was at his best. He had been there and he had trained for it all week, which very, very much correlated to us pit crew guys, right? Like we put in the work each and every week, each and every day to try to find tenths of seconds. So it was very cool to see Jimmy work so hard on his craft and in his physical and mental abilities. And now, seeing the same sort of thing out of William, it's no surprise that William has had so much success. Back in last year, we had 6 wins, which was the most in the Cup Series. We had the most stage wins, the most top 10s, and we had the best pit crew. The only thing we didn't win last year was the championship. And, that left like a bitter taste in our mouth the entire offseason. And we talked about that, and we talked about using that as fire or fuel to the fire for people who may have doubt the 24 team going into 2024, saying that last year was a fluke. And so to come out Monday to win the Daytona 500, the Super Bowl of our sport, is definitely very sweet for us.
Yeah, I was going to say, too bad it wasn't on February 24th. Then it would have been 24 on 24 in 2024. It was crazy.
Yeah, for sure.
It was crazy.
Yeah, to play those numbers, to touch on that, we as a team, we've kind of had this little moniker that's kind of taken off now, with the 24 in 24. And it's the 40th anniversary of Hendrick Motorsports. And Monday was 40 years to the day that Mr. Hendrick and Hendrick Motorsports made their debut in their first ever Daytona 500. So we had some numbers aligned there, which obviously paid dividends. And then I'm sort of superstitious anyways. My number personally is 22. Our 24 hauler was parked in stall 22. So, I told my girlfriend before the race, there's a lot of good juju. There's a lot of good signs. We win the Daytona 500. We go pit Dale Jr.'s car. And if you remember, Dale Jr. is a 2-time Daytona 500 champion. He won it driving the number 8 car, which we had pitted. And it was the 10th anniversary of his last Daytona 500. So when we got to the Xfinity stall post race and see Dale, I was like, maybe there's a little magic in this 8 car. And I think that we were probably 3/4 of a lap away from maybe sweeping all 800 miles and getting it done for him too. But definitely a cool day. And like you mentioned, man, there's a lot in the numbers for Monday and hopefully for the rest of the year.
Yeah, you got to think about something while that guy's out there going ring, ring. Hey, Ryan, well, let's just real quick, let's refresh people. Why am I talking to Ryan Patton? Who cares? I mean, by that, who cares? I mean, this guy's a pit crew member on the Daytona 500 win a car. That's special. But as you all know, and I well know, you aspired to be something totally different, I think, to a certain extent, when you were going to Ohio State and you were working with Eric Lichter in the strength and conditioning program at Ohio State when all hell broke loose in late 2010, 2011. Give people just a refresher on what you were doing at Ohio State and how you ended up where you are now.
That's a good question. I did my undergraduate degree at Ohio State, and then went to the sports management master's program. And as you mentioned, I was a graduate assistant with the football team. So what started out as an internship blossomed into the graduate assistantship. As you mentioned, under Coach Eric Lichter, obviously under Coach Tressel. And so I saw firsthand what it took to be not only a Big Ten champion, but, competing for national championships. And that was something I was accustomed to. I'm from Delphus, Ohio, right outside of Lima. I went to Delphus St. John's High School. So growing up, I was a ball boy for a 3-peat of state championships, 57 straight wins. It's still an Ohio high school state record. I was on those teams, and, football there is expectations are just as high as they are at Ohio State. So, but fast forward to Ohio State, Coach Lichter actually knew the head pit crew coach at Hendrick Motorsports at the time through their network and strength and conditioning world. And so I came down to Charlotte just to kind of observe, to see, what Hendrick Motorsports does to train pit crew athletes, how that correlates to training collegiate athletes. And, my goal and my passion was to to either be a strength coach or to get into the operations standpoint. Greg Gillum was the director of football operations at the time. Todd Alice was right there, Stan Jefferson, all those guys in player personnel. So I was very interested in going one of two ways, but definitely in the coaching realm for sure. And I came down to Charlotte. At that time, a lot of the NASCAR crews or NASCAR teams were looking at former athletes, bringing them in to be on the pit crew. The mentality was we can take an athlete and we can teach him how to pit a race car and we can teach him the mechanics of the car, but it's much more difficult to take a mechanic and teach him how to be an athlete, teach him how to take care of himself, teach him how to perform under pressure when the lights are on and you need a 9-second pit stop, at the end of the race to put your driver out first. So Hendrick wanted to hire me as a strength coach, to be honest. But the pit crew coach said, "Hey man, I see something in you. Have you thought about being a pit crew athlete?" And I said, "No, I didn't think I could do it." So Hendrick has a tryout process to be on what they call a developmental pit crew. And so what they do is they recruit across the country, different athletes in different walks of life. They bring them into Charlotte and they essentially put them through like the NFL combine drills. And which was beneficial to me because that was something I was helping Coach Lichter and our strength staff at Ohio State do, was train our guys for the NFL combine, train them for their pro days, and under Coach Lichter, our guys performed very well at the combine, performed very well at pro days. So it was not a surprise when I think it was like 6 records that the Hendrick pit crew guys had, and I broke 4 of them going down there and competing. So from that 100, they brought 50 of us back down for like a 2-day mini camp where they put the equipment in your hands, the tires, the air guns, the jacks. They teach you the basics of a pit stop, but they also see how you can do the job and how are you with teammates? How can you receive coaching? From that 50, they think they hired 10 of us at the time for a full-time position on the developmental pit crew. And the goal was to bring these guys in, try to move them up through the ranks and be on one of the 4 house cars at Hendrick Motorsports. So I got the call from Hendrick right after Coach Tressel resigned at Ohio State. I know there was going to be a little bit of uncertainty for myself personally, but I didn't think that the opportunity at Hendrick Motorsports would come along twice. And so I jumped in with both feet. I moved to Charlotte, and my goal was to make it to one of the top crews. And that's what ultimately happened to be. And I was fortunate enough to just get my career started on Jimmy Johnson's 48 team.
Hey, your first start in football, your first start in baseball, hockey, whatever. What was your first race? What was that first start in a NASCAR Cup race? Do you remember when and where and what happened?
Yeah. Well, my first race for the 48 team was the Daytona 500. It's our Super Bowl. It starts the season. And that year was 2013, and we won the Daytona 500. Back up to that. Prior to that, our preseason meeting, our crew chief was Chad Knaus at the time. He's the crew chief was like the head coach of the team. Yeah. And he talked to us about we were going to win, and we were going to win a lot that year. And sure enough, we go to Daytona and we win the Daytona 500. And I'm thinking like, this is easy. I'm early in my career. I've already won the biggest race of the year. This
I'm a natural.
Easy. I'm going to win. Yeah. I'm going to win this thing, 2, 3, 4 times. And so that's what made Monday so sweet for me, is that it was 11 years since that first Daytona 500 win. And I'm only one of 2 guys on our current 24 team that has been to victory lane for the Daytona 500 before. So I really just tried to soak it in. I was raised above average NASCAR and IndyCar fan for that matter as well. And so I sat in those stands on the front straightaway, and I watched the likes of Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson and Dale Earnhardt Jr. Before I was even on a pit crew. And so when we were celebrating with William at the start finish line on the Daytona logo in the grass, I just took a moment to look into the stands and just think about from being on that side of the fence to here I am celebrating victory in the biggest race of the year. And then I turned around and they're shooting off fireworks on the back straightaway and really trying to soak it in, Tim, because, those things are hard to come by, whether it's the Super Bowl of NASCAR, whether it's the national championship, anything can happen to derail your planning, for victory. And so, I was talking with some of my teammates this week, and, a lot of them didn't even realize there was fireworks going off, right? We're just so caught up in the excitement of the moment, and everything's kind of a blur. So I tried to slow down time as much as possible to enjoy victory lane with my teammates and to see all of their excitement. We've got a really good group of guys, and those guys deserve to win it for sure. So it was awesome to see that.
Here's what I like about Hendrick too. I mean, and everybody's adopted this too, but I thought Hendrick went to this at least as fast, if not faster than anybody, was putting the athlete in the pit lane, putting the athlete in the pit box. I'm talking about you guys. But number two, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think y'all videotape every pit stop, don't you? And then go back and look at it like a football game. Even in practice sessions, I think y'all do those kind of things, right? To just, like you said, sometimes you could pick up a tenth, but you sure don't want to be losing tenths and stuff and just shaving it. But let me ask you, were you a little bit surprised by how much the science of pit stops was at a certain level when you got there, but it's even increased now, hasn't it?
Yeah, like you mentioned, we train. I'll give you a layout of a typical week for the pit crew. So since we travel Saturday and Sunday, Monday and Fridays for us are kind of like our weekend. Those are our off days. But Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we're at the race shop. You know, we have a full-on weight room. We've got 3 full-time strength staffs, guys that train about 50 pit crew athletes. We've got a full-time pit crew coaching staff. We have a video staff. And as you mentioned, we film every angle of the pit stop. So there's 5 guys currently that make up a pit crew: a front tire changer, a rear tire changer, a jack man, a fueler, and a tire carrier, which is my position on the 2014. And each tire changer wears a helmet camera. The fueler wears a camera on his helmet. There's a video looking down on top of the pit stall over top of the race car. You know, we've got all these cameras, and whether that be at the track or at practice. And so we run those back and we look to see like what went right, what went wrong. In the middle of the race, we're trying to fix any sort of issue, whether it's over the wall or behind the wall. What a lot of people don't realize is that the road crew, the mechanics that work on the race car, they assist us on the cold side of the wall, as they call it. So they're taking care of the air hoses. They're catching the used tires that were taken off the call. They're giving us the new tires that we're about to put on the race car. So they're an integral part of our success. And our guys have a high level of buy-in. They take a lot of pride at doing that. And sometimes they want to watch film before we even want to watch film of the stop to see how they did and see how they can be better. So, you know, a shout out to those guys. But yeah, as you mentioned, man, when I first started in the sport, it was old style of race cars, we call it. We had 5 lug nuts on the car, just like your everyday driver. And pit stop times then were, you know, 10, 11, maybe 12 seconds for 4 tires, fuel, and any adjustments to the car. And now with this new car that we've got, I think it's 3 years old now, we've moved to a single lug nut, much like you would see on the Indy car or Formula One car. And so our pit stop times have dropped drastically, where, you know, if you're running a 10-second stop, you're getting beat. So our goal is somewhere about 9 to 9.3 seconds for 4 tires, fuel, and any chassis adjustment made to the race car to make it go faster. So there's a lot, like you mentioned, a lot of data, a lot of science that goes into those tenths of seconds, not only in our world, but obviously on the race car side of itself. So all this stuff was foreign to me, even being an above average race fan, getting into it. But listen, if there's any part or piece that we can make to make that car go faster, whatever, man. Well, I live my life in tenths of seconds. So so if we can do something to find speed, we're going to do it.
Hey, real quick, I don't want to belabor the point, but do y'all actually look at a replay of your stop in between stops? You understand what I'm saying? The previous stop?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
If things go extremely well, then what are you looking at? Are you looking at, you know, wow, this could have been a problem? Or are you just looking at the ballet and where the ballet maybe messed up a little bit? What are y'all looking at there?
If it's a really good stop, you know, there's not a whole lot to look at. You know, during the course of a race, we get that video feedback instantly. There's people at the track that can review it. There's people back in Charlotte that we communicate with that, you know, those coaches can review it. If it went really good, then we'll just try to replicate that thing, you know, because in our world, it's not the very first pit stop that has to be the best, but definitely the last one of the race is the one that counts most. So it's like you'd like to see your pit stops be super consistent. We call them just a bunch of singles all day long. You know, we want to be the kicker that when called upon, you know, we make the field goal, we make the extra point, and we run off the sideline. If we're getting any sort of publicity, you know, on TV or on Sports Center, we probably messed up. So if it's a good stop, we just try to see, hey, how can we replicate that? And how did the car come into the pit stall? We do a lot of work with William and even our young driver, Sammy Smith, who comes and drives the practice car to see how we can, you know, find every little tenth of second possible. And so if it goes good, man, we just kind of like, all right, let's do it again. And then just kind of keep it rolling. So the best thing is if they go good, nobody really wants to look at the film. It's a quick review and we're ready for the next stop. We just try to keep it like that. All the good vibes for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I would call y'all. It's funny you brought it up because I would call y'all the special teams of racing, because you're only going to really pay attention to y'all when something goes bad, super bad, or something really good, right? I mean, it's like but it's so essential to all levels of racing. F1, I'm talking about big time racing, F1, IndyCar, NASCAR. A second is an eternity on a racetrack. It's 100 yards going 200 miles an hour. Are you kidding me? So it's like it's crazy what you. Let me ask you this: did you think you would love it from the get go, or did you have to buy into loving it? You understand what I'm saying? I mean, the actual what you do.
Yeah. So my time at Ohio State, it was a great experience. It was a great opportunity. And, as you know, there's nothing like game day in the shoe, and it's very special. But I will admit that at that time, though, I was still young enough where I was like, man, I kind of missed the competition side,
Yeah.
And so being on a pit crew gave me the ability to be back in the fire. And I credit Kurt Coleman for this. He and I were really good friends at Ohio State, and I saw Kurt's work ethic. As we've talked before, James Lornice was another friend of mine. And it's good to see him on the Ohio State staff, because we know that those two individuals, they work just as hard, if not harder, than anybody out there. And I got to see a lot of guys firsthand their work ethic. And so when I first moved to Charlotte, I'll never forget, Kurt called me and he was like, hey, man, how's it going? And I'm like, man, this is great. I moved to Charlotte, and sorry I missed your call. I was playing kickball and there was silence on the phone, and I was like, hello. And Kurt let me know very quickly that I was there for a job, and it was not to play kickball, and that if I got hurt playing kickball, that Hendrick Motorsports is a premier race team, and they're going to find the next tire carrier. And so that quickly snapped me back to reality. That was probably within my first 2 weeks of being in Charlotte. And from that point forward, man, I was doing 2-a-day workouts just like Kurt was doing back in the day, and going back to the shop at 5 o'clock at night. And that's where I met Chad Knaus for the first time. Chad would be in the weight room working out, after office hours and stuff like that. And we struck up a pretty good relationship, and that was the goal. Jimmy Johnson was the man at the time. He was winning everything. And I told Chad, look, man, I came to Hendrick Motorsports because it's the best, and your team's the best, and that's the team I want to be on. And I worked like crazy to get to that opportunity. And that fire that was burning back in 2012 is still burning here in 2024. And so, I just kind of view myself as a seasoned veteran, a leader, so to speak, maybe the captain. Some people joke with me about on the pit crew, because I've had a fortunate career. I've seen and been a part of, 30 plus wins, a couple championships, and I just try to keep pushing forward. They say high tide raises all boats. And like I said, man, all those guys, at Ohio State, I've seen firsthand how hard they work. And, I think of a guy like Cam Hayward. Like, Cam was another guy who worked incredibly hard at Ohio State and still does. And man, kudos to him for winning the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. Well deserved. Yeah. Cam's a fantastic individual. But I saw guys like that, how hard they work. Even a guy like Brian Hartline, Brian had a great career in the NFL. He's a great coach. That's no surprise. That's who he is. That's who those guys are. That's what they've done. And man, I've just tried to take little pieces of all those great guys and try to hone that into myself.
Yeah. By the way, I want to get to that in just a second, but I wanted to ask you this one thing though. But the other thing is, when you look over your shoulder, I would think there are a handful of people who think they can drive on that level. I mean, be a driver on that level, just like an IndyCar, man. If you don't think these guys are special, you're nuts. Number one, they're willing to get in the car at the IndyCar and go 230 miles an hour. and make a turn. This ain't drag racing, folks. No, I'm just joking. But I would think there's a lot of people who think he could be on a pit crew, and I would think there's a line back there somewhere, right? That whether you see it or not, it's there, right? Of people who would love to be in your shoes, right? Does that also push you a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, just how I got my start coming in as part of the developmental pit crew. Hendrick Motorsports brings in a team of developmental pit crew athletes year after year, right? And it's just like any other professional sports team. We have 4 teams at Hendrick Motorsports. Our drivers currently are Kyle Larson, who he's going to run the double, so I know you'll see him in Indianapolis running the Indy 500. Chase Elliott, most popular driver in the sport. Both those drivers are champions. And Alex Bowman, who now drives the 48 car. those are our three other drivers. And so there's crews on each of those teams. And then we have backup crews, and those backup crews are there for two reasons. One, you mentioned pit road is dangerous. Cars are coming at you at 65 miles an hour. We're playing real life Frogger, as I like to say.
Yep.
So if you get clipped by a car, you've got to have somebody to put in. You have to have a backup so they can go pull from a backup team that's pitting on Sunday. But also they're there to push the starters and try to take your job, and that's the nature of the beast of sport and competition. So, I've learned over the years what it takes that I need to do personally in order to have success. Through experience. I've also, like I mentioned just a minute ago, I've seen other guys and seen their work ethic and seen how it's played out for them at the highest level, in the NFL. And so, together, I think I've got a pretty good handle on how it, but, couple that with my continued desire, it pushes you to stay on top, and you never get too high. I just won the Daytona 500 on Monday, but we're at pit practice on Wednesday and today. We're trying to find those tenths of seconds because the show doesn't stop. It's not like the Super Bowl of NFL where the Chiefs win and they've got months of partying and celebrating. We win on Sunday. We have a race in Atlanta this week, and we got to get the car ready. We got to get the car to Atlanta. We got to get our pit stops, our pit stop choreography dialed in, for situationally how it may be different from Daytona to Atlanta, and get ready to go, because nobody cares that you won the Daytona 500 on Sunday or this coming Sunday. There's like, who's winning the Atlanta 500?
Yeah, well, number one, you're exactly right. Number two, truth in advertising is, as people well know, I record some of these things well before the week they come out, but we're recording us on the late Thursday afternoon after you won the Indy 500. And number three, let me tell you something, Ryan. A lot more people are going to remember the winner of the Daytona 500 from this year than any other race this year, except for when they win the championships. I want to make sure. I want to make sure the hyperbole didn't go too far there. You know what I'm saying? But for you, every pit stop is the Daytona 500, right? I mean, it literally comes down to that. I wanted to ask you, how much of a relationship have you developed with Jeff Gordon? Obviously, it's a 24 car. He's still involved big time, as everybody knows, with Hendrick. He was right there in victory lane and stuff. I remember interviewing him as like a 16 or 17-year-old. He came to Columbus Motor Speedway. I think it was his first full pavement race in an all-star sprint car. And he set the track record there in qualifying 12.37 seconds. And of course, Columbus Motor Speedway isn't there anymore. And I think that record is his in perpetuity now. But what a talent and what a personality and stuff. And just what does he like to be around?
Yeah, for sure. It's a full circle moment for me, honestly. I grew up a Dale Earnhardt Sr. fan, and I didn't like Jeff Gordon. They were rivals. You're on one side of the fence or the other. So my Uncle Jay has been an avid Jeff Gordon fan from the jump. So he gives me a hard time from time to time that I was an Earnhardt fan, and now Jeff Gordon is one of my bosses at Hendrick Motorsports. I'm on the 24 team, his old team. So my Uncle Jay definitely reminds me of that, and reminds me of little DuPont days. But Jeff's a great guy. He's very hands-on. He's at the shop quite regularly. He loves the pit crews. He comes down to pit practice. He's obviously on race day. He's in our pit stall. He comes by and daps us up before every race, wishes us good luck, thanks us for everything we do, tells us to be safe. So he's a great dude. He's definitely in tune with everything that's going on from the competition standpoint to the business side of things at Hendrick Motorsports. And so, he's not just the face, he's boots on the ground. He's getting his hands dirty just like everybody else. I mean, even to that point, Mr. Hendrick, he was at the shop today at pit practice, watching us and congratulating us. And, obviously that's not something that happens, every day or every week for that matter. But those guys are really dialed in. And I think that's what sets Hendrick Motorsports apart, is that when you have people at that level who've had years of success, Hendrick Motorsports, 302 wins, 14 championships, a record tying now 9 Daytona 500s. Those guys are there day in and day out. Chad Knaus, I mentioned, 7-time champion crew chief for Jimmy Johnson, who just went in the Hall of Fame this past year. He's our competition director, and he's there at the shop every day. He comes down to pit practice. He checks in to make sure that everything is going well, runs smoothly, and we have all the tools we need to perform on Sunday and to do our job. So fortunately for me, I've been around a long time. I know those guys very well. They know my name, which is a surreal thing for me as just a kid from Delphus, Ohio.
Yeah.
Jeff Gordon, Rick Hendrick, these guys know my name, and so I do not take that for granted. I don't take that lightly, and it's just an honor to work there, and I've had such a blessed career for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of like Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer both knowing your name, you know what I mean? And saying hi, et cetera, and whatever, and being palsy with them. But there's something else that puts them on a level, you know what I mean? It's an interesting time. I wanted to ask you this before we go. Obviously, this whole relationship between me and you started when you were at Ohio State and applying your trade, and who knew where you were going to go, especially after the big tumult of the winter of 2011. But you stay in touch, et cetera. Where are you right now with this football team? Before, as I say, truth in advertising, even though I don't really only do a few ads on here. We were talking about just the incredible month of January that Ohio State has had, both from a coaching standpoint of, for example, getting Chip Kelly in as the offensive coordinator, elevating James Laurinaitis, your friend, to a full-time linebackers coach now, and some other changes they've made. But on the player standpoint, oh my goodness, I've never seen a January like this, both in the recruiting standpoint, the transfer portal standpoint, and the re-recruiting standpoint, which is guys returning because they're not satisfied with what their Ohio State resume says to this point. They want to go for a championship. As you're looking at this slightly from afar, because obviously you're big buddies with Quinn Temple, one of the backbones of the Ohio State support staff for Ryan Day. But what's your take on what you see right now?
Yeah, obviously I stay dialed into all things Ohio State football. And as you mentioned, Quinn's been a friend of mine for many years. And I think he was a manager at the time when, I was just an intern and we were both kind of finding our way. And we still stay in touch. And, I give him a hard time when I see him on game day on Saturdays behind Coach Day and stuff. And we kind of joke seeing each other on TV. But, he's a great friend. But as you mentioned, what an exciting time for Ohio State football, the month of January with, all the guys that committed to coming back and all the guys that have decided to transfer into Ohio State, right? Coach Day has obviously built something very special in the culture, in the environment there. So I'm down here in Charlotte, North Carolina. That's home for me. I'm in the heart of ACC country and SEC country. So, there's I've got a teammate that played football at Clemson. I got another teammate who played football at Wake Forest. And so I got some neighbors who are Bama fans and Georgia fans. So I'm definitely up against them all, but definitely excited about this upcoming season. I think it's something that's going to be special. Obviously, the last couple of years, to Ohio State fan expectations, put a bad taste in our mouth. But listen, like you mentioned, bringing in the talent of Coach Chip Kelly. I think Jim Knowles does a great job with the defense. James is an outstanding individual, so I'm glad to see him get an opportunity with the linebackers. Brian Hartline, what he's done as a player, what he's done as a recruiter, what he's done with that receiving core. I'm really excited to see where they go. Coach Tress always said that like September is for pretenders and November is for contenders. And I know you can't win a national championship in January, but you can certainly put yourself a bit behind by how you train and how you prepare as you build into the season. And so I definitely think by the time November rolls around, Ohio State will be there and be contenders. I'm excited about that. I'm excited for all my buddies still on staff. You want to see those guys do well, and hopefully, come the winter time, they're raising a championship trophy, and I'm raising a championship trophy as well in November. And maybe me and you can bookend the season with winning the Daytona 500 and winning the NASCAR Cup Series championship. There's nothing I'd love more than to do just that.
I was out in Vegas Super Bowl week with a buddy of mine. We go out there every year for the Super Bowl week, but it just so happened the Super Bowl was out there too. We didn't go to the game because I didn't have an extra $7,000-8,000 jing-a-linging in my pocket, and definitely not when I was leaving. But the bottom line is I could have done these parlays, and I saw one for William Byron, and it was a hell of a parlay, man. Where you pick the winner of a couple other things, but you picked the winner of the Daytona 500 and the winner of the game, and I didn't pull the trigger. It's like I did a couple years ago with Austin Cindric. I just knew he was going to win it 2 weeks out, you know what I mean? But I didn't do it. I want to ask you this before we go, Ryan. What is the one attribute, one thing above all others on race day that you doing your job You know what I mean? And what is the most important part of it? Is it the footwork? Is it, obviously you're trying not to drop the tire, you know what I mean? But what is it that you think sets you apart, that keeps you in that starting lineup?
I think my ability to be a great teammate. Hendrick Motorsports, we've got 600 great employees, and on our 24 team, it sounds cliche, but we really are a family. You have to think that there's 38 race weekends throughout the year. From I say basically Valentine's Day to Thanksgiving, every weekend but 2 this year. We'll be on the road competing, so that's a lot of time in the airplane. It's a lot of time in rental cars. And so I think that just comes down to teamwork. If you're trying to run a 9-second pit stop, it takes more than yourself. I can't do it myself, and when you watch the pit stop, the jack man, myself, and the front tire changer run in front of the race car as it approaches us. So I have to make sure that, I drop the right front tire off in a certain spot so that my jack man has success to jack the race car and to put the tire on the right front. I got to make sure that right front's out of the way of my front tire changer. So that way it's not blocking him from getting him, to the lug nut. And then I have to make sure that I'm not late running to the rear of the car to put the right rear tire on. And if we do that successfully, we're probably, from the time the car comes in and stops, to the time the car drops and all right side tires are changed, we're doing that in 3.5 seconds. And then we run to the left side and do it again. And as we run to the left side, I mentioned the guys behind the wall, the road crew guys, catching the used tires that we just taken off the race car, manipulating the air hoses so we're not tripping and slipping on them, giving us the new tires to put on the left-hand side of the car. The biggest attribute is teamwork. I remember when I was at Ohio State, there was a quote that was on the wall every day you walked into the Woody Hayes Athletic Center that Woody said, and it was, "You win with people." And that's one thing that Mr. Hendrick, he drives home, is that you win with people as well. And so we've got a lot of great people, and it takes a lot of unselfishness. As you know, you experience yourself and you see with all the great teams that you cover that, teamwork wins. It's not just one guy. You mentioned the Super Bowl, like Patrick Mahomes is an incredible player, arguably the best quarterback in the NFL, and debated that he'll be the greatest of all time, but it's just not Patrick Mahomes. He's got Travis Kelce. He had a great defense. He's got a great coach, and he has to be able to listen to all that, facilitate that, and be a leader. So for me, the number one thing is just teamwork, man. That's what makes it go. And I think that's what enabled us to win the Daytona 500. And that's what's going to carry us to winning the Cup championship this year.
Hey, that last stop, will you remember it forever? Obviously I asked you about the Jimmy Johnson when you won it way back as a rookie, but will you remember that last stop? What do you remember that just went totally right for you guys?
If you go to the end of the Daytona 500, there was an accident with a handful of laps to go, and we happened to avoid that, and our car was pretty good. And I've been in position to be up front and to have a shot to win and get wrecked, and it's not your day. And so we were ready. We were ready for the last pit stop. Fast forward, there's a wreck behind us as the caution comes out and the white flag. And in NASCAR, when that happens, that can mean one of two things. That means the race is over, and hopefully we're deemed the winners, or that means that NASCAR goes into overtime, which means they do what's called a green, white, checkered finish. And so that final caution comes out, on the last lap. We can't get too excited because it ended up being a photo finish between us and our teammate Alex Bowman, and it was like 2 inches was the difference between us winning it and losing it. And so you try not to get too exhilarated, because if it's not the end of the race and it is a green, white checker, well, you have to refocus and you have to be ready to do the next pit stop. So there was a wide range of emotion where, hey, listen, you can't get too excited because you might have to go to work, so it was kind of like a business as usual approach until they came across the radio and said, 2014 to the start finish line, you won the Daytona 500. And then, like I mentioned, man, just absolute chaos, excitement, exhilaration, and disbelief. 11 years between victories. There's a lot of people that work in the sport. There's a lot of pit crew guys that go their whole career and they maybe don't win one race, let alone win the Daytona 500. And to capture that and to be part of a team that's won it twice is just an unbelievable feeling, man. It's been a great week. I've tried to enjoy every second of it. That's for sure.
Yeah. I was going to say 199 laps and it comes down to that. Are you kidding me? Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah,
Hey,
they're hard to win, man. You mentioned tenths of seconds, man, make the difference, whether
oh,
that's on track or on pit road. So, 2 inches, that could be a slower pit stop at any point in time in the race, or that could be one bad move on track.
absolutely, absolutely. And boy, so much luck's involved too, man, when the big ones start spinning. Hey,
Absolutely.
Ryan Patton, thanks for joining the Tim May Show, man. I knew this was going to be fun. Whether it's fun for anybody else, it was definitely fun for me, my man, because I love talking racing. And when you can meld it, my three favorite sports I've always said were football, auto racing, and boxing. Two were the guys involved wore helmets, and the other one where they should.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt, no doubt.
And
Man, I tell you,
good.
it's been being from Delphus in the Lima Land area, getting a lot of support, text messages. I mean, shoot, even I had over 200 text messages Monday night
Sure.
from friends and family and people reaching out like yourself. And I can't tell you how humbled I am to receive that type of a support. I'm just a small part of the team, and so it means a lot. I mean, obviously, me and you go way back. I've had a tremendous amount of respect for you even before I knew you.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
for you to ask me to be on your show, man, is definitely an honor. Something I don't take lightly, and I appreciate you following along. You've always been a great friend and a great supporter of everything I've done, both at Ohio State and in my NASCAR career as well. So, like I said, man, I'd love to talk to you again in November, and we can be talking about booking the NASCAR season with Daytona 500 championship and a NASCAR championship. So I really appreciate you.
You got it. You know that, Ryan, man. You know how I've admired you, man. We've texted back and forth, and I like the way you found this path, man, and because it was almost serendipity, because you're sitting there in 2011 going, where am I headed, right? I mean, because when a coaching staff gets fired, it's like, or guess what happened? What happened there at Ohio State? You never know what your future is. You're building toward one thing, and now you found paradise in another. That's got to be just an incredible story, and I'm glad I was able to help you share it, my brother.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Like I said, man, Ohio State has meant so much to me personally, not to mention professionally, and a lot of great friends. All those 200 text messages were people from Ohio State, were people, whether it be former players or former coaches that were on staff that I worked alongside. And, we mentioned Coach Tressel. He's a guy that he still reaches out to me, and we text from time to time. I know I'm always going to hear about him, around the holidays, and I know I'm always going to hear about him Michigan week as well. So for him to follow along and stay in touch with what I do speaks volumes of the type of person he is. And, like I said, there's still a lot of great connections there in Columbus. And man, I'm just humbled that they share in as much as I share in those guys' success, whether it be in Columbus or in the NFL. It's truly humbling.
Hey, let's talk again, man, later in the season when William Byron's going for that championship, okay?
That works, man. I'm here for it.
You got it. Ladies and gentlemen, Ryan Patton. Ryan Patton, that's an interesting situation there, Bill. Sometimes you have a dream, but then your dream gets reshaped the deeper you get into life, right? And I imagine there was one point in time when you probably wanted to be the world's greatest shooting guard or power forward and stuff, but instead you end up writing about such guys and football players and stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, your dreams change, but I did, I'll say when I was 17, 18, I thought I was going to be a broadcaster, and then you get into writing, and now podcasting has probably become just as big. I mean, that we write just as much as we talk, and that's the interesting mix of it.
Yeah. By the way, you got a great voice. You ought to be in broadcasting, but that's a podcast for another day. Last question for you. We were talking a while ago about the playoffs, the 5-7 model, et cetera. Does college football have to look like the NFL to satisfy the modern fan? You know what I mean by modern fan, the newcomers, et cetera. Does it have to look like that? Because football was so much. I mean, the NFL got its start because of the popularity of college football. You understand what I'm saying? But is this going to be? Does it have to look like that for people to understand what's going on? If you follow my drift.
When the realignment was going on last summer, I wrote this story that looked at college football in 1984 versus 2024.
Yeah.
And I would contend that most pure college football fans would take the 1984 version. You would have the Big Ten with 10 playing everybody, 9 games, and it would be no Penn State, I mean, that's weird to think of
Yeah.
a Big Ten without Penn State. Great rivalries between the 10 schools in it. You would have the Southwest Conference, and you're down there. Like, you
Oh,
can't
yeah.
tell me those Texas schools, they might take that
Yeah.
over present day. You'd have the SEC schools, the traditional Southern schools. You'd still have the Pac-12 alive. You'd have the WAC. The WAC used to be fun.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't have playoff, and that was the tough part. So I think
ACC, you had the ACC. Go ahead. Yeah.
the ACC probably would be the weakest of the bunch,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
And then
Yeah.
you still have
They
the
play
Big East.
basketball. Yeah.
Right, but what I think the biggest mistake, you're right for starters. Yes, we're trying to appeal to a younger fan base, and the thing is, college football is a regional sport at heart. At its heart and at its soul, it's regional. I text my buddies all the time. They're all Buckeye fans or Notre Dame fans, and one of them at one point, I remember he texted me last year and he said, why is Washington in the Big Ten again? And I'm like, I don't, that because the difference with the NFL is, like, the Browns care about what the Seahawks are doing as far as the playoff goes. I don't think Ohio State fans or Michigan fans or Penn State fans really care about, like, Washington State or Washington.
Yeah.
And that's going to be tough to adjust to. And will people watch it? Yeah. Will we sell it? Yeah, they will, but it just won't feel the same. And that's why I keep harping on 8, but I think we're going too much. And there's other thing in college football that need fixed. The calendar needs fixed, the transfer portal, the revenue sharing end of it. I think those issues need to be fixed before you grow your business, so to speak.
Yeah. I think it's folly for them to get in the college football playoff and not announce sometime in the summer. By the way, first round games, players are going to make this much. If you move on to the quarterfinals, players are going to make this much. And you move on to the semifinals, they're going to make this much. And then finally in the championship game, players are going to share in the largesse, because, when you said the word appeal, that's what's interesting to me, because I'm not sure if it's the having more appeal for the younger fan, or if it's to appease, which you almost can spell with appeal, appeasing the networks, which want all of this. They want this inventory of big time games that matter. They're the ones that are really pumping in the cash, and college football or college administrators can't grab it fast enough, And so that's why we're headed down this path. And how much is too much? I mean, how much money do you really need? Because what's funny, the more colleges make off of all of these things, the more it seems the more they seem to spend. And so it's a never-ending crescendo. But the players definitely have to figure into it from an official standpoint, as opposed to the unofficial standpoint, which is the NIL realm of things. That's what's coming to a head here in the next 6 months to 5 years, is players being probably signing contracts and being guaranteed certain amounts of money to play for dear old you. That's my take.
And it's stress. It's stressing schools. No, it's not going to stress Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Georgia.
Yeah.
I look at the college football landscape now, and I see basically within the FBS, the 144 schools, I see 3 divisions now. I see the top 40, 35, 40 schools. Then I see that middle class. UCLA would be a great example. Boston College. I know that people are saying, well, these coaches are leaving to do this. Chip Kelly he left to take an offensive coordinator job. Yeah, that's bad for UCLA.
Yeah.
It's hard to coach at UCLA because you're on page 7 of the LA Times. If they still have newspapers, you're on page 7.
And their NIL situation is not good.
Boston College, same deal. Bill O'Brien's great for them. They got lucky there, honestly, because he'll do well there. But then you have the group of 5. And again, I mention it all the time on here. I'm a MAC graduate. It's fun to watch. It's competitive because there's parity, but it's not the same sport as what they're playing at Ohio State and Michigan and those
on a weekend, week out basis. It's not, you know what I mean? Occasionally. Like for example, TCU is a long storied, big time, program from the Southwest Conference, as you mentioned years ago and stuff. But, you saw them run out of game. that's what's funny is they can't grasp the idea that they are apples and at least pears, right? I mean, up until now, Ohio U and Ohio State University were considered the same place. I mean, as far as college football was concerned, of rules, et cetera, that they live by. And there's no way they do. And that's what's really coming to a head. Agreed?
Yeah, and I love OU, and there's part of me loves the idea that OU could get a 12 seed or 11 seed in the playoff and go play, and I'll be excited, and they'll go play Tennessee or Texas or somebody like that, and it'd be awesome. But the reality is, what's that score going to look like when they play? It would be like a momentous upset when they did it. Whereas in college basketball, they went to the Sweet 16 a few years ago, played North Carolina, had a chance to win, and
covered those
that
games.
Felt like a Final Four game.
Yeah.
But I do think we're getting closer to, I don't want to say we're going to split in two, but I mean, just we have to recognize that this is what we're dealing with. And that's not a problem, like I said, in Columbus or for the top 30 to 40 schools that can really do this. But until we put them under contract and do those kind of things and put some sort of regulation / safeguards on NIL, this is going to continue. These gaps are going to continue, not just between the Big Ten. Take Ohio State, for example. Another buddy texted me during the Minnesota game. It was those schools were playing two different sports. Ohio State versus Minnesota. What was that? I don't even remember the final of the game.
Yeah, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But Minnesota could beat them on any given year, but I can't remember the last time it happened. I think it's
Glenn
been
Mason.
a while.
Remember Glenn Mason way back when? We chased him.
He snuck one by him, and yeah.
So anyway, you never know. Well, hey, I know people get tired of me talking about it, and maybe you talking about it, but it's so much a part of the game now. It's like I keep coming back to Pete Thamel, what he said to me on this podcast way back in August, at the college football or at the Big Ten meetings. Major college football, and I'm paraphrasing, as he said, has never been more chaotic or whatever you want to call it off the field, and never better on the field. And I agree with him, man. The football we're watching getting played is phenomenal in some respects. And I think that's going to continue to be the pace. But wow, we're in for quite a ride here over the next 2 decades. Hey, Bill Bender, thanks for joining me again on the Tim May Show.
I will come on anytime you ask, Tim. Thanks so much for having me.
You heard him, ladies and gentlemen. You heard him, so I will tap that well as often as possible. And for Bill Bender, this is Tim May. We'll see you next week.